Good evening, everyone. I'm about to get started. We're not going to take much longer before I jump right in. If you haven't seen on Twitter already, we're going to be dealing with CSS Combinators this evening. And basically, we're going to be using them to build not so much of a framework, but basically just a very small, if you will, like a library or whatever. And I'm going to show you how you can use CSS Combinators to kind of improve your website functionality. So basically, we're going to have different features of the website function differently depending on what is next to them or where they are on the page, etc., etc. If you haven't seen it before, I posted a thread this week on Twitter that explains what CSS combinators are and how they work. Basically, they are operators that combine two selectors together. So you have a selector at the beginning and a selector that follows with an operator between, and that can be a space or a number of characters. And you can find that thread on Twitter. I'll also post it in the chat shortly. Yeah, so in just a couple minutes we will get started. Now, for those who didn't see it on Twitter, I would have posted this as part of a thread. I'm actually going to run through the different combinators first, and then we will jump into the actual code. So, as you can see, there are 4 of them. There's a space. There are, well, I should say the operators that you use, really, if you want to call them that. I don't think there really is an official title in the spec for these combinators, so it might be a little tricky if you're looking for, like, if you find documentation and you're looking for specific terminologies or whatever to use. You're probably not going to find any specific terminologies matching these, so I just call them operators like you would in most other languages. But yeah, there's the space, the greater than sign, and the plus sign, and then the tilde, of course, you can use as your operators. And I'm going to run through them quickly to show you what each one does. So the first one, of course, oh, sorry, I forgot I had this explainer here as to what combinators are. They basically combine 2 or more selectors, increasing specificity and allowing for greater possibilities. And as you can see, you can actually combine different combinators as well. So in this case, I have the descendant combinator plus the trying to remember the other term for it. Alright, I'll pull them up because it's hard to remember these offhand. Sorry, you have the descendant selector, which is a space, and this one basically allows you to assign properties to basically anything that follows the parent or the ancestor, if you will. So anything that comes after this space, and I mean immediately after the space, by the way, will pick up the properties that you put in your declaration block, and I'll demonstrate that shortly. And then the second one is the child selector, right? That's the term I was looking for. So this is the child selector, and it's denoted by this single greater than symbol, and this selector applies to any direct child of the parent selector. So basically it has to follow directly after the parent as opposed to being anywhere within the parent, and I'll demonstrate that difference as we get into the actual code. And then you have the adjacent sibling selector, which is a plus sign, and this will apply to any selector or any element that matches that selector. Of course, that is right next to the first sibling in the combinator. And finally, we have the general sibling selector, which is represented by a tilde, and this targets any sibling of the first selector regardless of if it directly follows the first. However, because CSS is a cascading language, everything cascades from the top down, you cannot run this backwards. So like if I had sibling 1 above sibling 0, it will not work. But there is one way that I'm aware of, at least, that you can use visually, at least. So you can use this so that the sibling 1 actually comes above sibling 0. And it will also demonstrate that using flexbox, because in flexbox you can set the order. I believe in grid you can do that as well. I don't really use grids that often, but the order can be set independently, and therefore you can actually have something that's in your code. It always has to be descending in the code itself, but visually it could be ascending. So I'm going to show you that when we actually get into it. Alright, so let us jump over to Visual Studio Code and we will get to it. I'm going to create a new file in here. I always create the folder one time when I'm creating the new file, so this time it will be CSS Combinators /index.html. I'm gonna start the live preview on this. Oops. Alright, Control-Shift-A. I always forget that command for some reason. Alright, started a whole lot faster today. I'm proud of it. Okay, so let's create the standard HTML template. I forget this one is HTML5, or let's use the boilerplate, because this one's more robust, and I prefer the more robust one. And we will call it CSS Combinator. Well, we'll say worksheet, even though it's technically not that. We'll also link to the CSS, which will be combinators.css. And in our body, we can remove this script. I don't think I'm going to do any JavaScript today, so we'll remove that. And let me see. I will add main. Now let's just add a section, article, and then we'll duplicate that. Let's add a header, or a heading really. And also let me create the CSS file in here. This should be CSS/Combinators. Alright, so new file. Oops. Sorry folks, I forgot to transition over to Visual Studio Code on OBS Studio, so you weren't seeing it. My apologies. You didn't miss too much, fortunately. Alright, let me create this file again. Oops, what did I just do? Well, I just accidentally opened my Windows switcher. Alright, so CSS/Combinators.css. And in here, let me see what we'll need. Oh yes, we'll set up some standard defaults. So we'll have root, this will have our variables. Then we will have this wildcard selector for basically everything. And we'll set this to box sizing, border box, margin 0, and padding 0. Now technically I could use a normalizer script for this, but that's kind of overkill to include a normalizer. But I would advise you, if you're doing anything you know, like professionally or for your portfolio or whatever, make sure to use a normal laser script because it will clear up a lot of the issues that you get working cross browser, for instance. Right, is this saving or not? Why is this telling me that there are changes? That's odd. Should... Okay, I'm going to ignore that and assume that it is actually saving it. Okay, it looks like it did. Good. Now in the header, I'm going to drop in the heading, I'm going to drop a simple title here. Not sure what I'm going to put in these. Maybe I'll just leave them blank, or maybe just a little text or something. I don't know. How about article 0, article 1, oops, article 1, and article 2. Alright, somebody is clearly not being saved here. It is being saved, so why is it? That's odd, and it's not reloading over here either. Something always goes wrong in Visual Studio Code whenever I'm trying to do this on stream, and it's usually me forgetting to link the CSS file, which didn't happen this time, so I'm not sure what happened there. But here we are. Alright, so it's loaded. Seems like everything is fine. I hope that this will live reload as it should. If not, I will have to probably open this in the browser or something. Anyway, so let me set up some basics over here for our body. Font family. I'm going to use Lato or Lato, however you choose to pronounce that. Sans serif as our fallback. Good, everything's loading correctly. Font weight, I'm going to set that to 200. I like it nice and light. For H1, I'm going to set the font weight to 300. Body, I'm going to set that to display flex. And you'll notice, by the way, I'm keeping my code in alphabetical order. The linter that I use typically warns you about that. I don't remember the explanation, and I do need to look that up, but there is a benefit to having your code in alphabetical order. I believe it's something to do with performance or something like that. But anyway, a good rule of thumb. And it also makes things easier when you're going back through your code to have things neatly organized. Alright, so I'm going to set the width on the body to 100 view width. And the height to 100 view height, and align item center, justify, we should go under H, justify content center, and let me give this a margin of 5 view height. Section. I'm actually going to share some code between the section and the body, so what I'm going to do is copy this and drop it up here. Copy body, drop that here, and then move these flexbox details up here. Good. Oh wait, one thing. Oh yeah, this is correct. What I need to do is flex flow column on the body. Forgot to put this full screen earlier. Flex flow row. Well, actually, yeah, let's put this to flex flow column and a wrap on here. Good. I think we could probably just share this between the body and the section as well, so yeah, save me some duplication. And in the body, I'm going to set a gap of 2.5 view height. And now I'm going to actually start using some combinators. So let me put a comment here. Here we use combinators. And the one that we're going to draw from is the descendant selector, which was a space. And we're going to use section and a wildcard selector. In fact, let me not use the wildcard because I may have dropped stuff in article later. So section, article, and that space, by the way, indicates that anything that matches this second selector and is within a section will have these properties. So section, article, and we're gonna give it a border of 1px solid, and we're gonna use a variable here. Call this article border. Well, article border color, let's call it that. Article border color. We're gonna make this one a dark gray. In fact, what I'm going to do is make this a variable and reuse it. So var dark gray, and let me put a comment here. Reusable color values. And let's put dark gray here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to actually reuse this in the body itself. In fact, what I think I'm going to do... No, let me leave it white. I was going to make the background dark to match the CSS Fun Stuff series I've been doing, but I'll leave it as is so I don't confuse anybody. But yes, we're going to reuse this color here as the color of the body. So, oops. That should be RGB var dark gray. How many of these did this just insert? Alright, good, there we go. Right, so now the body has the same color as those borders. And back down here, we're going to add padding of 5 view height and 5 view width. Or maybe we'll make this a little thinner. It's like 2.5 view height. Yeah, there we go. Alright, so that was the first combinator, and this is really simple and straightforward, of course. But let's say that we wanted to complicate things a little more. So what I'm going to do is actually add a button in, or 2 buttons inside of these articles. So I'm going to add a div and button, then duplicate this. I forgot how to write multiple things in Emmet. I need to look that back up. So let's say that we wanted to have a cancel button and an OK button, and we're gonna have class cancel and class accept. Well, first I'm gonna set some details on this div here. So article div. In fact, I can copy this up to here because I'm going to reuse the this declaration block that already has the flexbox stuff on it, but I'm going to change the flex slow on the article div to flex slow row wrap. And I'm also going to give this padding. So go with 1 EM. and in fact 0.5 EM and 1 EM. And we're also going to have a border on this. So border 1px solid RGBA. And we're going to use that same variable from the top, which is dark gray. Alright, in fact, let's reuse article border so that remains consistent, but this time we're going to make it slightly translucent. Alright, I'm not actually seeing the border on this, and it should be. So let me just double check that I did this correctly. It should be correct. 35, 35, 35. Okay, so somebody here is incorrect. Alright, let's see if I type this correctly. Article border color. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Article border color is an RGB value, so that's why it didn't work. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to reuse dark gray indeed. Alright, so now that works. Margin, gonna add that as well, but only on the top. So we're gonna have 2 EM 0 0 0. Good. Now this may feel like a little bit of tedium, but of course this is all part of web development and web design. We all know it takes a while to get even the most basic things done, but hopefully you'll still be able to catch on and not fall asleep. Alright, so div button, we're gonna reuse some styles for each button. I'm gonna have padding of 0.5 EM and 1 EM. Border none. Box shadow 008px RGBA. var dark gray 0.3. Alright, that's a bit thick. And let's also give them a margin. So margin 0.25 EM. Can probably shift these a little bit as well. Alright, so good. We got the buttons set up with some basic styling. And now we are going to go ahead and style them conditionally. So let's say we have the first one was cancel, I believe was class cancel. Cancel, we're gonna have the background color of that one be a kind of red. So let's go with 235 and 95 and 35. Okay, that's not quite red. So let's bring this value down a bit. Yeah, there we go. And the color, I'm gonna go with white. And then for the OK button, we're gonna have, instead of styling that directly, we're gonna have cancel plus OK, or plus accept, sorry. And we're gonna change the background color for that to something kind of blue. So it's gonna be 35 and about 105 and 205. About 235, sorry. Let's turn up the green on this. I want this to be a brighter blue. And color white as well. Now you may be wondering why I go through all this trouble for this. Now let's see what happens when I copy this button and put it down here and here. See, it's completely and style. Oh, I forgot to put it inside of a div. That's not exactly what I want to demonstrate, so let me just remember the div because we also have that. So let me drop these inside divs, each one. No, good, there we go. Now the OK button by itself is styled differently from the OK button following cancel because we've used a combinator to change it. But what happens if I add two OK buttons? Well, they're not OK buttons, but they're two @set buttons, so they're using the class @set, and I have OK and maybe, for instance. Only the first one gets styled because the combinator is set to only select the sibling, the direct sibling of that button. But we could also use the general sibling selector, which I would have talked about earlier, and then we can have both buttons take on their styling like that. So what I'm going to do to make that happen is, oh, by the way, let me make my text size a little bigger. I forgot to do that. My apologies. I forgot how small this font is on other people's screens. Yeah, so let me duplicate this, and we're going to change the plus sign to a tilde, making it a general sibling selector. Now both of them have the same style, but I'm going to change the background color on this one to a different color. Now here's the problem. As you can see, because this particular declaration block follows this declaration block, the cascade takes over because whatever comes lower in the file takes on a higher priority. So if I want to only style this one, I can move it up. And now you have only the OK button, the OK button being styled with blue, and the maybe button being styled with green. But what happens now if I drop some other buttons down here? So I'm going to copy these. Now, of course, all of these are marked as OK, OK, and that's OK because we haven't actually put in the cancel button yet. So I'm going to drop the cancel button in each of these, but I'm going to take out @set on one of them, but I'm going to alternate which one I take out, and you'll notice a change. So here's what happens. We have here the OK button being selected because, of course, it is directly next to its sibling and it has the class @set, and that is what we were using within our CSS code to select it. So it's not going to select just any random button, of course it's selecting only that class. Then if we have it down here now, where this one doesn't have the class @set but this one does, it skips over this one, but it does still select this one because of this selector right here. And now let's get even more specific. So let's say we have div, and then we have the child selector, and we use @set. Now I'm gonna put background color to something like purple. So let's go with 95, 35, and 135. That's kind of dark, so let's make it brighter. Alright, so it's not actually choosing this because the other ones are still overrating, and this is where CSS can become a little confusing because different selectors have different levels of priority. So basically, because the child selector is not as strong as these other two, they're actually overrating what I have here. So let us say that I were to remove the cancel from this last one. You now see what happens. The last one here, which has @set, becomes purple. If I add back cancel, it's overridden by that. So that's where sometimes CSS can be a little bit confusing, but it's really not actually as confusing as it looks. It's logical. It's just that this particular selector is less specific, if you will, and I think you should be able to see that here in Visual Studio Code. So the specificity is 011 on this. Specificity on this one is 020, and on this one also 020. So how can I overcome that? Well, there are a number of ways that I can do that, and what I'm actually going to do is have an ID added to one of those buttons. Let me just restart the music here a second. Playlist is over. I chose a shorter playlist this time, so that's why. Right, so let's say we add an ID to this last button here. Typically, you don't want to use IDs of selectors in your CSS code too often, but I'm just doing it for the sake of it here. So we're going to call this ID maybe, and there's one way I could do this without any combinators altogether, and that is to just have maybe, and that will style it as purple. Or I could have div. Okay, I'm not trying to select the reference there. Alright, good. Div maybe should do the same thing. And again, the reason for that is the specificity is actually higher. Because even though this one in the middle doesn't really change anything, it's still higher than the other two. Because as you can see, there's a 020, and this one is 101. Good to have something like this in Visual Studio Code. You don't actually have it in Atom, which is what I normally use. So sometimes I miss these little details because you're not always consciously aware of that. And so sometimes you can miss it. Now let me see. I'm going to try to think of a more complex scenario that you may want to use for your combinators. Like take for instance what I do in my CSS frameworks. When I'm building my frameworks, for instance, if I use a nav, I can have a button that is styled differently in the nav than it is in the body. So I'm actually gonna go right ahead and do that, and we're gonna drop a nav down here below the main. And the reason I'm dropping it below the main, despite the fact that it will be it will actually be hovering above the document, is because it will actually give it a higher Z index. And the reason for that is in CSS, which is what is styling your page, the rules are styling your page. The lower something is in the document, the higher it is, not so much in priority but in the Z index. So if you want something to be at the top automatically in the Z index, drop it at the bottom of your page, and you don't have to go and type Z index into your CSS file. And also it can avoid some confusion, because sometimes, and this gets into some more complicated territory, but sometimes if you are trying to override the Z index, you will find that because something is nested in something else elsewhere, the Z index doesn't quite work because it created a new context, and therefore you can't actually get it to do what you want it to do. You can type Z index 999 and it still will not work. So this is my suggestion: drop your code at the bottom if you want it higher. Okay, so nav is going to be position fixed, and let's use inset. Inset is relatively new but very useful. So we're gonna have it top 0 and right 0. Bottom is going to be 95%, and left is going to be 0. Background color, we're going to use the variable that we have at the top there, dark gray. Now you can see it's actually hovering over the H1 up there. So what we can actually do here is add some padding to the body at the top. Oh, Joshua, I will try to to include dinosaurs at some point. Thanks to a certain special someone for pointing out to me what was in the chat because I was not checking. My apologies. What we can do here is add a margin to the body. This is one way we can avoid that overlap. So margin, well, sorry, not margin. Let's add padding because margin can be a little tricky with that. So let's add padding in the top, and let's go with about 10%. That should do it. All right, wait, that didn't work. Sorry. Sometimes you can be looking for a solution and it ends up being the wrong one. So let me actually just add this 10% to the H1, and everything else here will set to 5VH. Alright, is it still overrated, or did this just not reload? Because this should work. Okay, I needed more margin. That was the problem. My mistake. I thought it was something else. It's just that I didn't have enough. I was running the calculation in my head, and I clearly miscalculated how much space I needed up here. My apologies. So let's just add some more until we have enough. Alright, 35% does the trick. Right, so now we have a nav at the top, and we have our spacing correct and everything. So, and another thing we can do here on the body is we could technically turn off overflow or turn off the scroll bar if we wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. That would have been just for fun to make things look a little more stylish without a scroll bar, but anyway, that's me being distracted by my own design-oriented mind. The nav, I'm going to have that borrow the properties from this declaration block, so we're just going to drop it right there. And this is a good strategy, by the way. I always mention this. Good strategy in your CSS code to avoid duplication is to identify anything that reuses properties and put them all in one declaration block. It's faster, it's easier to maintain, and it looks better, you know, error code, so you don't have a whole bunch of random things scattered all over the place. But I will caution that if you're working with a very large code base, as useful as that can be, sometimes it is good to split things up, and it really and truly depends on experience to know when to do that and when not to do that. Alright, so we're going to change the flex flow on this as well, by the way, to row and no wrap. I believe something else was using that too. Oh yeah, article div. I wonder if I should. I probably should put those together, but I won't unless I have to add anything else that uses this. There's not too much duplication. Alright, so within the nav, let's say we want to add a button. So we're gonna have the descendant selector, which is the space. So nav button background will be white, and color is going to be that same dark gray that we used before. We'll be using all stream long dark gray. And let's drop some buttons in the nav. Whoops, didn't mean to drag that. Believe it is right. There we go. Right, that's what I was looking for. So now we have 3 buttons in the nav. Each of them is empty, but you can see that they're there. just typing some gibberish inside, not really gibberish, just some random words inside of here. But to fulfill my promise, I did say I would add dinosaurs, so let's add some dinosaurs by name, actually. There's May, which is a small, I believe it is a... just trying to remember the name for these. No, they're similar to ostriches in terms of their appearance. Or at least skeletally they look like ostriches. I can't remember what they're called now. I think it's one of those, can't remember for sure. Let's also add T-Rex. And I can't believe I'm actually doing this, but it is fun for me too, so hey. And what else should I add here? Triceratops. And okay, let me go back to my CSS code and style these buttons a bit more. So we're gonna go with font size of 0.75 EM, because that's not small enough. I want it smaller than that. I am quite the tweaker when it comes to my designs. And when I'm teaching, I always have to remind myself, you don't need to overdo it. Alright, so no border on the buttons. Their height, we're going to set that to 100%. That is not height. That's not how you spell height. Right, there we go. Height, 100%. Width. In fact, let's leave width alone and use padding instead. Safer that way. Padding. Let's go with 0, and I was gonna do something responsible. Let's go with 2 EM on that. Yeah, there we go. So good. Now our buttons are styled appropriately, and I can have nav button first child, or better yet, since this is using Flexbox, let's use Flexbox to do this. So we're gonna put a gap in here of 15 pixels. Oh wait, wrong place. Right. Thank you very much, email. Don't need that. Not sure if y'all would have seen that or not, but I just got a notification. I forgot to turn off my email for the stream. So let me just pause that a second. Then again, I don't think you would have. No, I remember I have my setup correct, so it shouldn't interrupt. But it did interrupt me. Anyway, yeah. Me turn on this gap. Don't need that much in the nav. And yes, first child. Or maybe I'm going to go with last child instead. I'm going to put a last one off by itself. So nav button, last child, margin left, auto. Right, spaces everything out nicely. So good. Now we have the nav button styled separately from other buttons. But let's say we're to add a button that's not any navs. So I'm going to just drop a button up here somewhere in the main, or better yet, let me drop a div here. This is not semantic and this is not recommended. You should use separate navs, but I'm going to pretend that we have 2 navs in our page. So let me actually move this header up here. I should have done that from the beginning and didn't even think of it. Anyway, so moving the header up there, and then we're going to have a fake nav here. I'm going to call this one class fake nav, and I'm going to copy the buttons from this one to that one. And you'll see already by the way that these buttons are styled completely differently from the ones up here. Well, let's style fake nav separately, of course. Okay, good. So Fate Nav is styled differently, and now we will style its buttons differently as well. Now, if I'm not mistaken, these buttons should not pick up whatever styles I added because I already have some combinators up here that style these buttons separately. So whatever I do down here should not affect them, other than any properties that don't overlap with theirs. Even though this is lower down in my CSS code, it should not have a higher priority. So I'm gonna add button and width. Well, width is gonna be picked up for sure. Let's put that to auto. Well, not width, sorry. Let's use flex. Auto, or should it be 1, I believe? Alright. I'm forgetting a property here. Is it flex grow? No, it is not. Or is Fate Nav? No, Fate Nav is not using flexbox. That's why it's not picking that up. But I still think I'm forgetting a property offhand. Let me drop Fate Nav here. Right, and then Fate Nav will need to be... Oh, that's a double thing there. Fate Nav will need to be flexible, roll, no wrap. Gap 0. If I don't need to style these to get them to stretch, I can use Fate Nav itself to do that. So align items, or is it no? Justify content. Let me see if I can use this. I believe. No, I'm forgetting some properties here offhand. Alright, let me go back down here and see if my mind will kick into gear. Flex 1, I believe. Still getting gaps around them. So margin 0. It's not that either. Ah, forget it. Can't remember what it is offhand. And I don't feel like opening up MDN to check for that property right now, but I am definitely missing something. It did work up here though, I just realized that. It's working in the nav, so I did remember it correctly. Yeah. So I need to add that property in here. Flex auto, or initial. Let me put it back to initial. Right. So I did have the correct property, I just wasn't seeing the correct result for whatever reason. But these should be stretching right across when I use flex 1. Let me see if I can inspect. Does this allow? It doesn't allow inspection? That's disappointing. Anyway, no big deal. So right, as I said, these buttons are styled separately from these buttons down here. And I can go ahead and style them even further by adding a menu. So what I'm going to actually do here is drop in a pretend menu, ul li by 5. Don't worry about how ugly this all looks, it will be fixed shortly in our CSS. But there we have the T-Rex menu that is just taking up a lot of space. Let's go ahead and fix that with some combinators as well. So, ul. First we're going to turn off the buttons, list style, well not buttons, the what you call the bullets. That's what I meant to say. List style none. And position absolute. I think I'm gonna actually put this to display below the T-Rex button actually. So let me move this up within the T-Rex button. You don't have to do it this way, but I chose to do it this way for a reason. Alright, for some reason this is not showing where it should be. Because this should now be below the button. Did I make a mistake here? I don't think so. And I'm still getting a list L on this. That is odd. Or is this just not working like it should because it wants to be special? Because I have the correct property and I have the correct selector, and no, it is not doing what it's supposed to do. Computers always find a way to embarrass us in public. Alright, let me just go ahead and install the rest of this, and hopefully I'll figure out what it is that is up here or what it is I missed. Okay, something is definitely up otherwise. Is it something I forgot to close? I doubt it. Time to debug. Border 1px solid red. It is not even... Oh, wow. It's not even picking that up. Alright, so UL, LA. Let's just hide the all for now. Display none. It's not even doing that. Amazing. Something is clearly wrong there. Alright, we'll take this back out and see if the problem is something else. For whatever reason, it didn't like being a not button, but that should not have been any issue. Anyway, position, absolute, and I will make Fate Nav be positioned relatively so that this will all work as it should. Good. That cleared that up. And now I will move this off to the left by putting it, off to the right, sorry, putting it to rate 0. And width, we will put that to about 50%. Those little mistakes just now, or issues I should say, kind of threw me off my game too. In terms of remembering what I was about to show y'all. Anyway, no big deal. Alright, so we cleared out the margin and everything. Good. Now I'm going to style the buttons inside of the menu differently from what I have inside of the fake navbar. So let's say we have UL button by itself. Background color could be RGB var dark gray. Color 1, Oh, sorry, color white. I meant to do that. I don't know where I got 1 from. 1 is not a color. That was me being absent-minded for a second. Me also can't really tell why this looks like it has a little padding there. It should not. Oh well, no big deal. Let's turn this back off because we don't need that. And let's shift this down just slightly. Alright, I want to show y'all how you can actually override the order of something visually while it is lower down in the document, if you want to use the term physically here. Physically doesn't really apply because it's digital, but yeah. So let's claim it is physically lower down in the document, but you want to have it higher up. So I'm going to put in here, let's go with alligator. This is not a dinosaur, but hey, we have a random alligator, and we're going to put the pseudo class of last child, and my computer decided to stick. So we have, there we go. Had to wait for a little bit for my computer to unfreeze. We're gonna style this one differently. Background color, let's go with green. Alright, I obviously chose the wrong one there, so last child button instead. Let's see if that, right, there we go. I had the wrong thing selected. Had the wrong selector really. So this time we're actually using 2 combinators technically. And again, my computer is frozen. I think Visual Studio Code is getting tired of me, so it's freezing the computer. Anyway, we have 2 combinators in play here. They're the same, of course, which is the descendant selector, but we're using it twice over. But let's say if we actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to add 2 buttons in here just so I can show you how complicated this can become. Last child button, first child. Alright, getting some freezing again. Hopefully this will not continue too long. Give me a second, folks. Let me just double check and see what may be up with my system, because this freezing shouldn't keep happening like this. Alright, I found out what was causing the freezing, and it's an update. Computers these days. Randomly updating without asking you anything. And I'm on Linux, so yeah. Anyway, no big deal. Sorry, we selected the last child and the first child there, but those are not combinators that I really want to show you. So what I'm going to do is have last child. Oops. Last child. And then I'm going to use this one and choose button, and I'm going to style it with color blue. But I'm going to style this one with color red. So right, so here we have, in both cases, we're using 2 combinators, and we're styling what really and truly should actually, in your head you may be thinking it should just go from one to the other, or well, sorry, it should go from this one here, the first one, to both, but instead it's overridden by this second selector here. We can check the specificity and see why. So you have 013 and 023. So the first one is overriding the second one. And if I move this around my code, it will not affect anything either. Still works. I'm trying to remember, there was something I was about to do with this. Oh yes, now I remember. The order of the flexbox, or the item in the flexbox container. We can change that, and we can move this last child here up in order. So let's choose UL LA last child, and I'm gonna put order 0 and UL LA order 1. Right, and there we go. So now this one here is higher up in order in the flexbox container, but it is technically in our document at the bottom of the container. But I'm going to make this even more complicated by adding a sibling selector to our code. So let's go with, well, in fact I need a class for this, if not it's not going to work as I want. So I mean, I could have used I could use nth child and figure out which child it is, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to use any math right now and confuse us even further. So let's just put brother man for fun. So brother man here is gonna tell the last child brother man plus UL LA last child, or better yet, just UL LA, and or we could even just use LA. We don't need to be that specific. So brother man plus LA, and then we're gonna put background color to white. Did I select that correctly? Let's see. Alright, I now remember. Oh yeah, I don't need UL. I should need UL LA, I think, because this I need to, what I need to override basically is the color of this here, or is it the button? Let me double check here which one I actually have to override. Oh yeah, it's the button I need to select. If not, you're not gonna actually see it. So alright, computer. My computer is still updating whatever it's updating, and it's kind of freezing things up a bit. So if you see any jumps, that's what's happening. Alright, so I don't need UL LA, I need LA button. I forgot that it's the button I recolored. Right, there we go. Good. That's what I wanted to demonstrate all along. I hope you didn't get lost along the way in the confusion of me finding that. So brother man may be all the way down here, and the next LA that follows is also all the way down here, but that one is being displayed at the top of the flex container because order is set right here. We have it set to order 0, whereas we have the other set to order 1. And then I am selecting using a sibling selector, an adjacent sibling selector. I am choosing to put the color of this button to white, the background color. But I can get this to be even more complicated. I know this is really getting ridiculous now. But let's say that I have brother man LA. Well, no, let's go with tilde LA button. Let's just check the specificity of both of these. 012, right, and 012. So I believe, if I remember correctly, this one should override the other one. What I'm actually going to do here is I'm gonna need 2 of these so I can get this to work as I want it to demonstrate what I'm thinking of. So I'm gonna duplicate this twice. Now you can see these are being selected because they follow immediately after. So let me move this down to here. So now all of those are background color white. Let's change the color on these to, I don't know, what colors do we even have? Right, so we'll be making them purple for now. And sorry, all of these that follow are being changed to purple and white, but I can then add background color blue, color white. Right, and so the last one, which is, well, not really last one, the first one up here, which was set by order to be visually first, but is actually in our code directly following after Brother Man, is being set to background color white and color blue, whereas all of its non-adjacent siblings are being set to background color white and color purple. Now, of course, this looks very confusing, and it is, I'll admit, it is kind of confusing, but it should demonstrate to you just how complicated CSS can get. But as much as this may seem complicated, it's actually very useful. Because like if say you were building a framework and you wanted to, I'm going to remove this menu by the way, so I can show you what I'm referring to. But let's say you wanted to have functionality like what I have here, so that you have different buttons that serve different purposes depending on what is next to them or what is within your HTML code, which could be added dynamically by JavaScript or by PHP or whatever you may be using. You can put logic within your CSS code that determines that if the option to click maybe is available, that this button becomes green. And of course that logic would also correspond with knowing that in your HTML code the maybe button is going to come after the OK button, and the OK button is going to come after the cancel button, etc, etc. So even though it may not always seem logical right in CSS, you may be thinking, well, CSS is just styles. CSS also has logic to it, and you have to be aware of how your code is going to be written in terms of where things are going to fall and all that, so that you can then apply that logic to your CSS code. And it can get even more complicated than this. This was really and truly a kind of basic level example that I was showing you, but it can get a lot more complicated. And as you're building frameworks, like I like to do for fun, which I know sounds crazy, but as you're building frameworks, you get to realize how important that is. Because as I showed you, I have different style buttons in this nav up here versus this nav down here, and like in my framework, a null CSS, I have button style differently depending on if they're in the head, the body, the tail, which are the 3 sections of the website that you can have. They can be styled differently on mobile devices, they can be styled differently, and there are various conditions, all using one class. So yeah, you can get all sorts of complicated stuff, and when you use combinators, it can be even more fun and even more interesting. But I'm not going to complicate anything any further today. I could, but I think I've covered enough. You can look out for another edition of CSS Fun Stuff. I'm going to be putting together a kind of, not really like a game, because I can't really figure out how to make it into a game, you can say, but I'm not going to spoil it any further than that. Just look out for another edition of CSS Fun Stuff on Dev, on my Dev profile. But you can also go and look for CSS waveforms, which I would have done recently. That one was actually featured on the Dev newsletter, so you can go and check that out. I really love this one because it's fun to play with. You can grab the source code from my Gumroad page as well, my Gumroad store. And you can also look for, let me grab the other one that I did. The first edition of CSS Fun Stuff was Halfway Borders. This one is also really fun. Not so much one to play with, but it's really fun and it's surprisingly useful because you can use this for like loading page animations and stuff like that. It's actually animated in the full project, but here you'll just see, you know, a nice looking circle. Believe it or not, all I use for this is CSS. It is not an image. It is well, I mean, what you're seeing here is an image, but this actual thing here was done with CSS. So that is an actual screenshot of the rail code, the circle on the side, and I use CSS to blur the borders and everything to give a nice effect, and did some animations and stuff. So you can go check that out on my Gumroad page and my dev profile. And also make sure to follow me on my various platforms, whether that be Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook as well. I'm pretty much everywhere. But definitely follow my blogs on Dev2, and I may get around to the hash node at some point, but I haven't really gone into that one as much yet. But yeah, you can go and follow me on various platforms and make sure to check out my stores. I've got some templates and also tutorials and other stuff available that some of them you can get for free and some you can buy for a relatively low price. So yeah, and look out for some more tutorials on YouTube very soon. I have one to edit that is really cool, dealing with Flexbox, so you can look for that to drop in the near future. Alright, until next time, I am Roland Ditsar, aka Roland Taylor, or Roland Taylor, aka Roland Ditsar. Got that one mixed up. Either way, it doesn't matter. Yeah, y'all know who I am. Music today was provided by Creators Lib Free. They produce free music and sound effects for content creators, so you can check them out on YouTube as well. And yeah, I will see y'all on Tuesday when I'll be back to graphics again, and then also on Thursday next week where we'll be continuing some CSS stuff. So yeah, I'm out, and I will see y'all later.